Hey, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, I'm the newsman, Sam Sachs. It's the first day of May, aka May Day, aka International Workers' Day. Solidarity to all those celebrating, all of you who are workers. Of course, here at MMN, it's always Workers' Day. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just sabotaged ceasefire negotiations by saying that he will order an invasion of Rafah with or without a hostage agreement. Earlier this week, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that Israel had presented a, quote, extremely generous offer to Hamas to exchange prisoners and put in place a temporary pause in fighting. But in a statement on Tuesday, Netanyahu undermined those promises. He said, quote, the idea that we will halt the war before achieving all of its goals is out of the question. We will enter Rafah and we will eliminate the Hamas battalions there with or without a deal in order to achieve the total victory. Of course, an invasion of Rafah would be catastrophic, with over 1 million war refugees seeking shelter there. And the Biden administration has urged Netanyahu to not go through with it. But Middle East Eye reported that preparations for an invasion are underway, including some rather disturbing tactics to break up families. Quote, Israel is reportedly setting up a complex system of checkpoints that will prevent men of military age from fleeing Rafah in preparation for its offensive on the southern Gaza border city. The checkpoints are designed to allow some women and children to leave Rafah ahead of an expected Israeli offensive, but unarmed civilian Palestinian men will likely be separated from their families and remain trapped in Rafah during the assault. The outlet added, quote, the creation of gender-based checkpoints around Rafah would put a spotlight back on Israel's practice of stripping and forcibly detaining male Palestinian men and children as it faces rising scrutiny in the West of its conduct in the war. Remember, at any point, the U.S. could put an end to this by saying it will stop supplying Israel's weaponry, including its Iron Dome munitions, as officials are required to do under U.S. law if it's determined that Israel is using those weapons in a way that violates international humanitarian law, which agencies in the State Department have already concluded it is. And for those who still have doubt within the department, I have some good news. Amnesty International just did your homework for you. Human rights group cataloged hundreds of civilian deaths in Gaza resulting from U.S.-provided bombs. Quote, during the current reporting period from January 2023 to present, Amnesty International has extensive documentation of several incidents of civilian death or injury by U.S.-made weapons or other evidence of use of these weapons inconsistent with international law. These include cases of civilians killed and injured by Joint Direct Attack Munitions, or JDAMs, and small diameter bombs, SDBs, both produced by Boeing, and injured by 155 millimeter white phosphorus artillery rounds manufactured by ammunition depots in Arkansas and Louisiana. The report adds, quote, there is an extremely high risk that U.S.-made munitions or other materials and services provided to the Israeli government are being used in violation of international humanitarian law and human rights law and inconsistent with U.S. laws and policies. The United States government must immediately suspend the transfer of all weapons to the Israeli government so long as compliance with international humanitarian and human rights law are not demonstrated. So long story short, the Biden White House isn't just failing to stop a genocide, it's actively participating in it. And domestically, it's crushing dissent against that policy. After anti-genocide student protesters took over a campus building at Columbia University this week, the White House released a statement condemning the protests, claiming they're anti-Semitic and hateful. It also said that taking over buildings is not peaceful. And that was the green light for university administration to once again call in the NYPD to violently arrest students. Hundreds of officers descended on the campus overnight Tuesday to clear the Gaza Solidarity encampments and brutalize and arrest student protesters. According to the group Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine, police used tasers and tear gas. Video shows officers with their weapons drawn while clearing out protesters, and student journalists were threatened with arrest for trying to report on what was happening. Cops damaged property and shoved protesters downstairs, creating a far more dangerous and destructive situation than anything that existed during the peaceful occupations. Columbia University President Manoush Shafiq, who for the second time called cops to beat up her own students, has now asked the NYPD to be an occupying force on campus through May 17th. Meanwhile, over at UCLA, the police took a different approach overnight. They stood down while pro-genocide counter-protesters were given free rein to violently attack the anti-genocide encampment. Reporters on the scene captured mobs attacking pro-Palestinian demonstrators with pepper spray and sticks. I'm sure that condemnation from the White House will be coming down any minute now. All of this going down to silent students who just want their schools to divest from like a handful of companies that profit off genocide and apartheid. If you feel like you're going mad watching all this happen, trust me, you're not alone. Former President Trump continues to make history. The first U.S. president to face a criminal trial after leaving office, and now the first U.S. president to be found in contempt during that trial. On Tuesday, Judge Juan Merchan, who is presiding over Trump's New York City hush money and fraud trial, ordered the former president to pay a $9,000 fine for violating a gag order imposed on him. Trump defied court orders to not attack witnesses and jurors by making several posts on social media, calling witnesses sleazebags and accusing jurors of being secret liberal activists. Under state law, the maximum penalty is just $1,000, and Judge Merchan ruled that Trump violated the gag order 9 times, hence the $9,000 fine. Now, obviously, this is not a large sum of money. It's basically Trump's monthly McDonald's budget. And the judge admitted that the fines aren't likely high enough to actually deter Trump's behavior. So he said that if the former president continues to defy the gag order, he'll consider jail time as the next option. This is from NBC News. Quote, he warned in the decision that he would not tolerate further violations of the order and said that if necessary and appropriate under the circumstances, he would impose, quote, an incarceratory punishment on the former president. So, of all the crime doing this guy has done, it might be his posts that actually put him behind bars. And as someone who also posts, I find this pretty concerning. Actually, I don't. I don't care. Screw him. We're just a couple weeks away from a union election at a Mercedes-Benz plant in Alabama, and the UAW has a lot of wind at its back. Not just coming off an historic win at a Volkswagen plant in Tennessee last month, but also winning a labor standoff over the weekend against Daimler Truck. 7,000 unionized workers were on the verge of going on strike against the truck and bus maker after their labor contract expired. Just ahead of the deadline, though, the company caved and agreed to end its tiered employment and give its unionized workforce a 25% pay increase over the next 4 years, plus cost of living adjustments and profit sharing. Rank-and-file union members will now vote on whether or not to ratify the deal. The president of the UAW Local 3520, which represents the Daimler workers, Corey Hill, told Reuters that the win sets an example for the South and that he hoped workers at the Mercedes plant near Tuscaloosa were paying attention. The two companies are actually related. Mercedes owns about a 30% stake in Daimler. That vote at the Mercedes plant, which is actually in Vance, Alabama, and employs 5,200 workers, is scheduled for May 13th through 17th. In preparation for it, the company shook up its executive team this week, replacing its U.S. CEO. A guy named Federico Kochlowski is taking over the job now. As Bloomberg reported, quote, companies that are seeking to dissuade employees from unionizing often replace members of management as a signal to workers that their concerns are being heard. The prior CEO had reportedly held captive audience meetings with workers where he spewed anti-union propaganda. The labor struggle at Mercedes has been contentious. UAW filed multiple unfair labor practice charges against the company in the run-up to the election, alleging unlawful terminations and worker intimidation. UAW also filed suit in German court, alleging that Mercedes is violating law in their own country that requires companies to respect human rights, including the right to organize a union. Weed news. There's some weed news to report on. The Drug Enforcement Agency put forward a proposal this week to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug, yet still one that's illegal. The move, which still needs to be approved by the White House, would see pot move from the Schedule 1 list of substances, considered the most dangerous with least medicinal benefit, including fentanyl, cocaine, and meth, down to Schedule 3, alongside substances like ketamine and anabolic steroids, which are all still considerably more dangerous than pot. With a Schedule 3 listing, marijuana is still a controlled substance according to the federal government, which means you can still be arrested for it. As the AP reported, the 15,000 dispensaries operating in the U.S. legally under state law will now have to also register with the DEA, something they obviously don't want to do, and something the DEA isn't equipped to handle. President Biden, who initiated the review of marijuana scheduling, has always been against full legalization, which would mean treating marijuana like alcohol, which is also a more dangerous drug. But during his presidency, the marijuana industry has exploded. 38 states have legalized it in some form now, 24 for recreational purposes, and it's a $30 billion industry, so capital is all in on it. In fact, in many ways, the fight has shifted away from legalization and toward unionization, ensuring that workers in the field and at dispensaries make fair wages and have safe working conditions. Although the administration is not ready to embrace full legalization, reclassifying marijuana would be one of the most significant drug-related reforms that the DEA has made in decades. It's a very rare thing for the agency to loosen its grip, even slightly, on the reins of the drug war. So that's good. And it's obvious why it's happening now. There's an election in 6 months, and Joe Biden is remarkably underwater with young voters, down 11 points to Trump among the under 35 electorate, which is almost unprecedented for a Democrat in the modern era. That's what happens, though, when you start enabling a genocide that the kids can clearly see unfolding on their phones every day. I guess Biden's plan here is to tell young people, listen, Jack, I'm the cool president now. Don't worry about what's happening in Gaza. Just smoke some weed. Luckily, the kids see right through the shtick and know, actually, you can do both. All right, the show ends today with a sunrise from Maryland. It was sent in by Dom and Liz in Westminster, who requested that it air today on International Workers' Day. Enjoy. Thank you, Dom. Thank you, Liz. Show's over. Thank you for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please sign up for Means TV, subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels, and follow us on social media. One day capitalism's gonna fall. Till then, we'll be right here. See you tomorrow.